Hey everybody, this is Brother Jake. I'm the pastor of Emmanuel Baptist Church, and I'm here to bring you the midweek word this week. Just want to remind you of a few things leading up to this weekend. Don't forget that this weekend is Father's Day, and so if there's someone in your life that maybe you need to go grab a gift for or something like that, you've had a warning. It's coming up, so keep that in mind that Father's Day is coming up. But today I want to spend some time with you, really just sharing a call to men, since we are headed into Father's Day. I think one of the things that the church is in dire need of today is godly men rising up and leading in the church. If you just look around, there's a lack of pastors. I mean, last time I checked in the Gibson County Baptist Association, so just really focusing on Southern Baptist churches in Gibson County, I believe there were 12 churches without a pastor. That's not counting other churches of other denominations. So in some ways, there's a famine of godly men being raised up for ministry, and there's really a famine of just godly men in general being raised up and being willing to serve in the church. And I think it even grows more so, that famine grows more so when you start thinking about godly young men and bringing their families into the church. And so what I want to do today is just a call to all men. And so, men, if you're listening to this, I want to encourage you to share this with men that you know, because this is a call to all men to stand up and live for Jesus. And so today we're going to be reading from the end of 1 Corinthians, so 1 Corinthians chapter 16, and we're going to read verses 13 and 14 together. So 1 Corinthians chapter 16, verses 13 and 14. And Paul is beginning to wrap up his letter, essentially, to the Corinthians. But you can see in this passage that in some ways, the whole church really needed this letter. Don't get me wrong. But it really seems like he was writing to the men in the church, at least to them, to share it with everyone else. And he writes this in 1 Corinthians 16, verses 13 and 14. Be watchful, stand firm in the faith, act like men, be strong. Let all that you do be done in love. So there's a reason why that I think he was writing specifically to men here, is because he literally writes, act like men. And he writes earlier in earlier chapters about men acting like men. And so let's go through this together and see what the call is for men, and let's celebrate this as we approach Father's Day. So verse 13, he tells us several things. Be watchful, stand firm in the faith, act like men, be strong. First of all, be watchful. We should certainly be watchful over our churches, absolutely. But I think there's a call here too to be watchful over our homes. If you are married, you are to be watchful over your wife. And I don't mean that we're supposed to be overbearing or anything like that. I'm talking about we need to watch for her soul. We need to care for her soul. We need to be watchful how the enemy may be attacking her, and how can we pray for her? How can we protect her? How can we take care of her and serve her? If you have children, the same thing. I guess every generation thinks this at some point. But man, I'm so glad I didn't grow up hearing the things that my children are going to have to grow up hearing in the culture that we live in. I mean, it's a difficult time for children to be growing up. and just with all the different social issues that are going around. And we need to be watchful over our children and make sure that we raise them up in righteousness. That doesn't mean that they're going to grow up and do everything that we said, and it doesn't mean they're going to be perfect. It doesn't mean that they're not going to make mistakes, because I know in my own life I was raised a certain way and I made mistakes along the way. And so, of course, our children will do that too at some point, but there's a sense in which we have to be watchful. And, we just read through Ezekiel on Sunday nights, and Ezekiel was told by God to be a watchman twice for Jerusalem, or for Israel. And the idea of being a watchman was to stand guard and be able to look out over the horizon. And if an enemy was coming, they were supposed to blow a horn. And a watchman that sees a threat and does not blow a horn has the blood of the city on his hands. And I will just tell you, if we are supposed to be watchmen over our homes, over our wives, our children, and we are not blowing the horn and raising our children up in righteousness and drawing our wives closer in righteousness, listen, in some ways, if they are not born again, I think their blood will be on our hands. I genuinely believe that will come up when we stand before the Lord one day. So be watchful. And we'll speed this up just a little bit. Stand firm in the truth. There are so many obstacles to doing this today. So many voices of opposition. So many things that are competing with the truth. Listen, it is easier, and it may even feel more fun to go out and make sure that your child is at every ball game over the weekend. It may be more fun, and it may be easier to tell your child yes to these things. But I will tell you that you should stand for truth, and you should have your kids in church, have your family in church, and stand for truth even when it means that it is unpopular, and it may bring some grief towards your family for doing the right thing. And hey, if that means, you know what, we're not going to play ball at 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning because we're going to be in church. If that's what standing for truth looks like in your context, then do it. Sometimes standing for truth means that we have to tell our children no to some things that they want to do that are opposed to the things of God that maybe everybody else is celebrating. Maybe it means that we have to explain to them some things that are maybe awkward, but we have to tell them the truth, because if we don't stand for truth, there are outside voices that are standing for something else, and they are more than more than ready to take your family and help them wander off into myth. So this is a call to men to stand firm in the faith. Another call to men is to act like men. How refreshing is that as a man to read that and hear that? The Bible just tells us to act like men. Right now we're being told that it's bad to act like a man. This idea of toxic masculinity, this idea that that being a man is somehow inherently bad. Well, God has commanded us to act like men. God has commanded us to have a sense of masculinity about us, and part of that serves the home. The home, the way God has instituted a home, He has instituted a way that your wife and your children need you to be a man. And I know people have different opinions about that, but brothers and sisters, what that means is that you are standing up for truth, you are being a watchman, you are being what the Bible says a man ought to be, and you're doing that in front of your wife and in front of your children, and you're unashamed of that. Of course, I understand that people have taken manhood and use it in such a way to abuse women and children. But that is not what Paul is talking about. He's talking about acting like a godly man. And there is nothing wrong with being masculine in such a way that it glorifies the Lord. And so that can be done. He also goes on and says for us to be strong. Now, I'm going to pair this with verse 14 because so often today we think that being strong means we don't feel any emotion, we don't show any kind of tenderheartedness or love towards our families, and that's not what he's talking about here. Being strong can mean far more than just the ability to not show emotion. Honestly, sometimes being strong is being willing to show emotion around your wife and your children. Being strong means that whenever Satan is shooting his fiery darts at you and your family, you just remain resilient. And you stand there taking the blows, but you're not going to waver in the faith. You're not going to waver in raising up your children in righteousness. You're going to do what's right. And so let's be strong in what God has called us to do. But I say all that to get to verse 14 because while you're being strong, while you're acting like a man, while you're standing firm in the faith and being watchful, verse 14, let all that you do be done in love. I understand that as men, sometimes it's difficult or it may feel uncomfortable to tell people you love them. But all of your actions towards your wife and your children should show them that you love them. And honestly, you should be willing to tell your wife and your children regularly that you love them. They need to hear it and they need to see it. So let all that you do be done in love. And I will tell you that if we'll also take some of these principles to the workplace, take some of these principles to the mission field, wherever we're at, it will serve us well. To just everything that we do, for it to be seasoned with love and to be done under that filter, that mindset, that will be a great blessing to everyone we're around. So, brothers, if you're listening to this, let's be men. Let's stand up and be courageous for the Lord and do what He has called us to do. Let's care for our wives, care for our children, and love them well and lead them to Jesus. So, friends, the responsibility falls on the man. It falls on the husband, the father, and we're going to be held accountable for that. And I, for one, want to be able to stand before Jesus and say, I did everything I could. Well, friends, this has been the Midweek Word for this week. I hope you'll be blessed for the rest of this week. If I don't see you this weekend, if you don't attend Emmanuel, hope you have a very happy Father's Day weekend. But we will be meeting tonight at Emmanuel for our midweek services and for our Kids Awana program. And we'll also meet on Sunday morning at 10:55. We'd love to have you there. So come see us at Emmanuel Baptist Church. But until then, I will talk to you next week on the next episode of the Midweek Word. See you then.